Hi, welcome back to the channel. I thought what I would do today is introduce you to my special pioneer partner, Takeedza Nyadzao. So there he is. You can see him on the screen. Looks a bit battered there because he was battered. So this man was, at the time that we met, in what was called special full-time service for at least 10 years. That was in the year 2000. So here's a picture of me when we were assigned to the area, which I can show you on the map. This is the hall that we built. And you can see that it says there on the screen, Chipinge Kingdom Hall of Jehovah's Witnesses. So that's what's there. Of course, things have become more developed now. Whether that's the exact coordinates, well, it looks familiar to me. It looks like the same hall, except that the territory has changed. Anyway, Takeedza wrote me a letter, which I have in hand here, that's survived all of these years. I'm just going to put it on the screen and read it out to you. So it goes as follows. Oya Congregation, PO Box 80, Centenary, 13th of the 8th, 2001. 13th of August, 2001. It says, "Hi, Matt. How are things with you? With me, things so far so good. How was your journey? Mine was a tiresome one. I had a night of sleep on the way. Finally, I make it. The group is a little bit bigger than Chipinge Central. The brothers are very hospitable and spiritual conscious. In brief, happy days. 2 elders, the special pioneers. I, regular pioneer, a sister. The territory is big but fruitful. As regard to communication, 46 kilometers away to the nearest town and banks as well. I can't make it paying that money, $600 this month. I hope next month is ideal for that. Please, Matt, let us recover from this move and do whatever we can to correct misconceptions caused by Chipinge assignment. Lots of love from me. Greet me all in your new partner. Takeedza Nyadzao." So Takeedza had been my pioneer partner. And this was an assignment that was called by circuit overseers and service desk a demon stronghold. And this was the first time that I came across the hazing ritual. In other words, we were sent into this political hotbed. There were farms being invaded, or if you want to say reclaimed, depending on your perspective. This was the atmosphere in Zimbabwe, that this was a political hotspot. But more than that, Chipinge was also known as a place of superstition, a lot of spiritual rituals going on, and politicians who would go back to their roots in the area because it was felt to be a hub where they could consult spirits and get guidance and direction on what to do for ruling the country. After all, it was a Chimurenga, or an extension of the Chimurenga, which was a big upheaval that was set in motion when Nyabuya Nyahanda and Kuguvi were put to death by the British. So I thought I would just introduce you to Takeedze there. He was my partner, who I was informed by a key fiduciary was, to use their own words, killed by demons. So after this hazing and blame and all of this kind of stuff that was put onto us for the Chipinge assignment, which is a story in its own right, I was told that he didn't survive, killed by demons. So however you want to interpret it, those are the words that I'm given by the key fiduciary. I'm also told by that key fiduciary that at that time, Jehovah would choose between us whether he himself as the fiduciary would have success or whether I would have success. And that success would be an indicator of Jehovah's blessing. Now today I thought I would also focus in on the matter of health. If there is a link between, say for instance, high control religion, like Jehovah's Witnesses, or similar, and autoimmune diseases, like Crohn's disease, or lupus, or even something like fibromyalgia, though you might say that that's a completely different thing. But the kind of disorders I'm talking about are ones that are reported very often in the Jehovah's Witness community. So is there good evidence that a high control religion causes autoimmune disease? Presently, you could say no. That's a short answer. What is supported is that long-term psychosocial stress and trauma, things that many people report in high control religious settings, you could say from fear, loss of autonomy, shunning, ostracism, blame, like what happened with Takeedze and myself in a hazing ritual that we were supposed to agree to. If you say sexual shame, family conflict, whatever form that is used, it can dysregulate the proper stress system within us. So if you think of immune pathways, those are linked to risk, or let's say wrecking autoimmune function. Why? Because of the stress-sensitive conditions that have been ongoing. So how does that connection work? Well, I think before I go on again, let's look at this with thesis, antithesis for synthesis. In other words, always there's critical examination, critical thinking, essential critical thinking when I'm discussing my experience here. So chronic stress, how that works for health. You think of HPA axis dysregulation, or let's say immune shifts, to put it simply. What is it? It is persistent activation of the body's stress system. So that's what we're talking about when we say HPA axis and sympathetic nervous system. Have you heard of cortisol? Well, cortisol changes within us those dynamics, and it's linked to inflammatory signaling. So there's things like IL-6 or TNF, alpha. So over the time, if that is predominant within a person's system, it essentially blunts what should be a protective immune function, while it promotes a low-grade inflammation, stomach aches, headaches, all sorts of conditions. And that is what is relevant to autoimmunity and symptom amplification. So when there's ongoing trauma from being put into a place that is termed a demon stronghold or a political hotbed or whatever, having to build our own accommodations or build a kingdom hall from scratch, sleeping by a fire, fetching water from a nearby spring, my partner killing a guinea fowl so that we could eat, our planting sweet potato and trying to hope that it comes up in 3 to 5 months. It all adds up. So large cohort and meta-analytic studies show that these traumas can start with adverse childhood experiences and stress-related disorders, including post-traumatic stress disorder. So that's often associated with increased incidence of autoimmune disease like SLE, RA, MS, IBD, Crohn's. So the mechanisms involved likely include epigenetic changes, chronic inflammation, and immune imbalance. So if a person is raised within a higher control religion, they are put at odds with their society in a developing phase of their life. So social isolation or shunning doesn't just happen in the religion. It happens because the religion expects the person to be set apart as very different. And so the mental health strain can come into effect at a very young age, 4 or 5 years of age, as soon as a person is placed within a school system. This creates the physiological wear And among Jehovah's Witnesses, which again is largely my experience specifically, research on those who've been a part of the religion, presently or former members or associates, it shows that all of these factors like shunning and social isolation, or just being very, very different, causes a situation that has lasting negative effects on mental health, employment, confidence levels, life satisfaction, all factors that intensify chronic stress loads. So while this doesn't prove a direct autoimmune link, we are seeing more and more that it outlines a plausible pathway. And so once we name it, we can become more familiar with the pattern. So symptom-sensitive conditions like fibromyalgia, it isn't autoimmune, but it often co-travels with autoimmune disease. And it's highly stress reactive. Trauma, PTSD are associated with higher FM prevalence and worse severity. So that can make the overall illness a burden, can amplify it, it can feel like a much larger issue in chronically stressful environments, much like our Chipinge situation at the outset. So in terms of actionable ideas, what does this mean in practice? Well, it means seeking trauma-informed, multidisciplinary care. So for Crohn's, that would be gastro. You can think of rheumatology, SLE, RA, and a clinician that is comfortable with religious trauma complex PTSD, if relevant. So the person needs to have the specialized training. So evidence suggests that stress disorders along medical therapy can help improve outcomes. The idea is stabilizing the stress system, getting consistent sleep, which would have been robbed, as you can see in the letter there. Takayedze hadn't been sleeping. We'd probably been sleeping for about 3 hours a night, doing rotational guard duty due to the hectic area that we were placed in. And I can say that that went on for years. It didn't just end with that assignment. It went on, and on. And of course, Takayedze eventually reportedly died. So exercise, general aerobics, strength, weights, exercise, as is tolerated, pacing oneself, having mindfulness, appropriate relaxation. And bear in mind that in the Special Order of Jehovah's Witnesses, it is like an occupation, because you can't just, as a volunteer, decide, well, that's it, I'm going on holiday now. No, it's pretty much like an employee-employer relationship, even though it's volunteer work or volunteer service. You don't have the freedom that you would think is associated with one who's working as a volunteer. In fact, the conditions are extremely harsh and extremely demanding. So now, trying to deal with PTSD or complex post-traumatic stress disorder, you need therapies like EMDR or CPT, social support from people that recognize what's actually happened, not people who are oblivious to what's going on. And so that can help reduce HPA axis overdrive. Now, for that particular place that we were at, it was a very insular society. You can see in the letter that for communication, Tucker adds his next assignment. For him to get communication, it was 46 kilometers away from his station, which he would need to get permission from the branch headquarters to be able to move around from. So having isolation in that kind of situation, if you compound it with the hazing or being blamed for a situation or shunning, soft shunning, whatever, if that person is affected by that, you've got to now prioritize safe community support groups. Some persons go to what's called XJW community, the so-called apostates, or high control recovering groups. Why? Just for survival. Now, bear in mind, some of these groups are connected to licensed practitioners. So, doctors, clinicians, these are persons that would be connected to these groups, or you would find out that there's that connection and you'd see, oh, well, it's got some kind of regulation there. That's very, very important. And so, yes, we bear responsibility on finding out about how that's regulated. So this is all for high control recovery. It's important to have good peer connections, healthy ones, have good therapy. Social connection, or just being present, is a very powerful stress buffer. And so we emphasize that we need to be reminded of medical adherence first. So for something like Crohn's or lupus, disease-modifying therapy is foundational. Stress work complements, but it doesn't replace it. So yes, body and mind work together, and spirit. General clinical guidance, specific regimens must come from our legitimate treating specialist. So what is the bottom line? Is there a link between high control religion and these autoimmune diseases? Well, it's plausible. The link isn't doctrine as yet. It's not well established overall. There are persons arguing against it. There are persons who say, yes, we have made the links, we have got the statistics, we've got the research. So you've got a divide. You could say it's still a pioneering front line in many respects. So chronic stress, trauma, and social harm, which can be elevated in high control contexts, can it lead to immune dysregulation and symptom amplification on top of, let's say, even genetic vulnerability? Well, it would be important to go and get a personalized map from somebody who is specializing in that field. So this discussion, again, I've had to overcome procrastinating and all of that kind of thing and just say, right, let's get into at least a discipline of getting a video out, let's say once per week, so I can talk about something that has been occupying my mind a lot. And this is part of it. Stress autoimmune connection is well established, I would say, in my opinion. I can see the doctors that have researched it. I can see those that have done peer-reviewed studies. Yes, I know that there are some who give the antithesis on this. That's why I say it's a pioneering frontline. So though you've got strong evidence of chronic stress, trauma, adverse childhood experiences like ACEs, it all adds to the increase of risk for autoimmune diseases. Lupus, Crohn's, multiple sclerosis, that's another one. Studies show measurable changes in immune signaling and higher autoimmune incidence in trauma-exposed populations. So the religious trauma piece is, you could say, newer. Psychologists, sociologists, yes, they're doing a lot to document the effects of high control religions like Jehovah's Witnesses or Mormons or fundamentalist groups. Scientology is another one that comes up. For good or for bad. So on mental health, including depression, anxiety, PTSD-like symptoms, and social isolation, this is sometimes framed under religious trauma syndrome, RTS. When I examine Jehovah's Witnesses, I make a distinction between wheat and the weeds. I say it's the weeds that make it hard for the wheat or for the genuine. But the research is mostly qualitative or survey based. It hasn't yet been deeply mapped to biological illness outcomes. So here, I suppose, I'm trying to connect two strands that haven't been fully joined yet. The autoimmune literature and the religious trauma literature mostly run in parallel. But scholars of trauma and health have noted the overlap basically in theory. You don't really have a lot of published studies that have explicitly tested whether leaving, being shunned, being hazed, or living long-term in huge stress, high control religion correlates with autoimmune incidents. The insight is pioneering. It's not to be dismissed, however. We don't say, look, religion causes disease, although some might absolutely say that. That might be a simplistic way. All that this video is really doing is it's reflecting on a situation or pointing out that there is psychosocial environments where high control groups, where there is chronic fear, suppression of autonomy or social shunning, family fracture, it creates prolonged trauma stress states, exactly the conditions known to dysregulate immune function. So that makes it plausible, researchable links, you could say. But one that academic psychology and medicine haven't yet fully agreed upon or robustly tested. So I suppose this video could be seen as pioneering ground or treading those waters. We can see a connection. I don't believe I'm the only one. And it fits existing science, but it hasn't been formally articulated in easily accessible literature, let's say. So researchers can study to test this kind of link, surveying members, ex-members of high control groups, religious or non-religious, whatever, but that fit that kind of profile. And they can look at health history, autoimmune diagnosis, the controlling for genetics and general trauma exposure. So that way, this kind of insight can be translated into something that's publishable. So again, coming back to a child that's raised in, say, for instance, Jehovah's Witness religion, they taught nonconformity to social norms as soon as they hit school. So you can have refusal to eat birthday cake, if that's what the present doctrine is. Refusal to participate in sports or extracurricular activities, because that's what the current doctrine said. Or scholastic achievement, which is seen as pride, or pride linked to academia, which is looked down upon as a path that used to lead to higher education, which we can see now has a green light or is still in this transitional phase for Jehovah's Witnesses, because your governing body, the time of this video, 7 days ago or a week or over a week, lifted the disciplinary action. But persons in, say, for instance, my age group, or until that disciplinary lifting, they suffered severe restrictions in the form of, you can say, thought offense in the religion. So that's a classic example of chronic psychosocial stress being baked into a child's developmental environment, which is exactly the kind of early life strain known to have long-term effects on health, including autoimmune vulnerability. So is there a way to unpack the chain clearly? Look, I am quite aware that I can ramble about these things. But again, my hope is that I can make a start. Make a transcript, run it through AI and polish it. At least this is a form of self-discipline, getting this out there. So let's look at number 1. Childhood environment and high control religion. So we talk about nonconformity on display. Refusal to celebrate, what did we say, birthdays, or avoid national holidays, or shunning sports or school clubs. So the child is immediately marked as different socially. What does this lead to? Isolation, ridicule, bullying. Are some recognized, commended for that? Some don't. Then there's suspicion of achievement, the normal reward systems, grades, sports medals, academic honors. That's redefined as worldly pride. You won't see a child in that environment with the medals necessarily displayed out in the open. Or if they do, it's rare. So it removes access to typical developmental validation, and it replaces it with conditional religious approval only. And that might be very narrow. Very, very narrow. So restriction of thought, labeling curiosity as suspect, higher education, or critical inquiry as, let's say, thought offenses. It fosters internalized surveillance. The child is trained to monitor or suppress natural thought patterns. Bury it. It becomes a gut problem. Or it manifests as a psychospiritual disorder physically. So number 2, psychological load. There's chronic vigilance. The child must continually self-police, fearing exposure or punishment. There's an attachment stress. So parental love is often tied to religious conformity, so that non-conformity risks rejection from even the family itself. It's intimate. Identity conflict. Normal developmental drives, curiosity, mastery, or autonomy are reframed as dangerous, producing an internalized shame 3. Physiological consequences. Allostatic load. Chronic stress means that body's stress system, HPA axis and sympathetic nervous system, is always on. It doesn't turn off. The autoimmune system, wear and tear, the stress hormones like cortisol, it becomes dysregulated. Inflammatory cytokines remain elevated. Epigenetic changes. Trauma in childhood can literally alter how genes linked to immunity express themselves. Now as an adult, they have to live with that. If it crystallizes. 4. Links to autoimmune and stress-sensitive illnesses. So by adolescence or adulthood, this baseline of stress biology can predispose to autoimmune disorders, the Crohn's, the lupus, the thyroid issues or diseases, or stress-amplified syndromes, fibromyalgia, the chronic fatigue syndrome, IBS. So even if not every child develops disease, the risk load is measurably higher. So I'd like to hope that this is an insightful introspect or thought video or something with some kind of insight that, of course, yes, needs to be validated by the scientific community in a proper way. Most trauma research focuses on abuse, neglect, war exposure. What I'm describing here is chronic institutionalized psychosocial trauma. It's unique to high control religious contexts, which creates the same biological footprints as those better known traumas, the war-torn situation, demilitarized zones, whatever. So what's being said essentially? Well, growing up in a system where even thought can be punished creates prolonged stress, a state that is biologically indistinguishable from other forms of chronic trauma, and it may predispose to autoimmune disease. So yeah, I suppose that could be said to be pioneering, if we're connecting it to doctrinal cultures. Child development and immunology, what is one line? So take a child that goes to school and screams. I remember my first day screaming my head off at going into school. I can remember Pink Floyd's The Wall. We don't need no education. We don't need no thought control. I remember that. 4 or 5 years of age. So that song from Pink Floyd, or that cartoon that was there, I was placed within a very typical English school. Headmaster had the cape on in the traditional way, in the way that Pink Floyd's video had. And I remember screaming my head off at school. So that was how my experience started, my childhood memory. And it sticks with me because it encoded a threat there. Shame, helplessness, all at once. And so I can't just say that that doesn't matter emotionally or biologically. Yes, that for me was my experience and my predisposition. So are there some grounded practical things that can help? Well, yes, grounding is such, sitting or standing with feet planted, naming silently 5 things that you can see or 4 things that you can heal by feeling. Feel. 4 things that we can feel. 3 things that you can hear. 2 things that you can smell, or 2 breaths. 1 thing that you can taste, or 1 word that comforts us. And having slow, steady breaths. If the memory or trauma still feels alive, there can be an orienting phrase like, that happened then and I'm safe now. And you can do that until the body settles down. Another one is a gesture of putting hand over heart. Breathing deeply 4 to 6 times and saying one small validating sentence. I was a child. I did not deserve that. Journaling. My first day at school, you can write, I remember how it felt in my body, what I wish someone had said to me. Don't edit it, just write. Let it pour out. So the longer term steps that help rework that trauma imprint is trauma-informed therapy, EMDR, CPT, somatic experience. Can reduce the change, or the charges rather, of early memories. So body pacing, body based practices, gentle exercises. You want to talk about yoga or stretching, paced breathing. For Jehovah's Witnesses, yoga would be a no-no. So is there stretching? Yes. Is it based on that? Realistically, yes. It helps re-regulate the nervous system. Peer support, very, very important. Talking with someone who understands religious trauma can reduce shame and isolation. And so if this kind of memory triggers panic, self-harm, those kind of impulses, or if we feel unsafe, don't hesitate to contact local emergency services or a crisis helpline. Do it immediately. So I've sometimes said to myself, am I safe now? You know, what if the religion sends in elders, new players who've saying that they have concern for me, yet have simultaneously listed me as dangerous? They might have known, look, I may or may not have refused certain medicines, or have definitely refused certain medicines, which maybe 99% of Bethel has accepted. And they send me a sick child to come and hug me in a weaponized way, citing, well, if you're obedient to Jehovah, you can expect his protection. But if you're insistent upon exercising your conscience decision to refuse certain medicines that 99% of the Bethel has taken, well, that's your own problem. You've placed yourself into a very awkward situation, and yes, you're going to have to suffer the consequences. And we may say that that could be a sign of divine disapproval. And should you die, then you are condemned to die because of your decision. It's put in a very cold kind of way. So when you say, am I in a safe place now, just looking at that kind of thinking, which can creep in very, very easily, you might say, well, I'm not really safe. So from those kind of words, however, if you want to validate it or say, look, that's just that your mind's wild with these kind of things, it might not be direct violence. It's manipulative behavior. You know, I use this illustration or real life situation of somebody sending in a sick child to hug me or hug a person, and then labeling that person as dangerous or invoking divine condemnation because of their conscience. Those are psychological weapons. It's not safety, it's coercion. It's trespassing without consent. So it's emotionally, psychologically adding up. It's an ongoing pressure. There's surveillance, whether that was intentional or whether you can say, no, it wasn't deliberate. The person is on such high alert, keeping the nervous system in a fight, flight, or freeze state. So is that true safety? No. And that's why we need more and more trained persons or aware persons to be able to deal with this kind of thing. Because spiritually, a conscious decision that's put a person into this kind of situation, framing it as a crime against God or the society with which they're in, that's spiritual abuse. Because it uses divine authority to break down our agency and equate autonomy with condemnation. So it might not be an immediate physical danger if we're using the child who's sick hugging us situation. But we're not safe or feeling safe in the sense of being free from manipulation, pressure, and threat. And it can feel like life or death. Why? Because the religion has linked medical compliance with eternal life, or refusal of what the majority of the tribe is doing is equated with death or obedience and life. That's hectic. So it means that even a personal health choice gets twisted into cosmic proportions, cosmic verdict. And so enter in another double bind. Obey us or die. It's a hallmark of high control groups. It keeps us captive in fear. So if we were to put these tactics into plain words, what would it be? Well, weaponized innocence, using a child who maybe wasn't demonstrative, but is told by their guardian or parents, go and hug Uncle Matt. It's a pressure tool. It's essentially emotional blackmail. It's gaslighting because it calls us or calls the target dangerous, but this is a demonstration of care. It also has the shunning connection, because the fact that that's happening means that you're not really accepted. It's social signaling. It frames it in a way that it pretends concern. But it's maintaining a weighted leverage. And then there is the apocalyptic threat, tying conscience to death or divine disapproval. So those aren't acts of genuine concern. Those aren't acts of genuine love. They are mechanisms of control. So what are the proactive steps? Well, we've heard about boundaries being set. So we're allowed to say no to surprise visits, or even arranged visits for that matter. We can document our interactions through email, texts, note writing. If you're not allowed to record something, then write. Especially if there's a record of harassment. And allies, we need them. So trusted family, trusted friends, even if it's just a few, keep them looped. Don't carry the weight alone. And when it comes to medical things, have medical autonomy. Have the medical right, or our right to accept or decline treatment that is legally ours. in nearly every country, regardless of religious affiliation. And then there's psychological reframing. If somebody pronounces condemnation, it isn't divine truth. Those are organizational judgments. And if it's coming from authorities that change their minds, well, already we've got evidence that no, that's not supreme. That's more human. So that might mean that we have to separate the divine or the supreme or God from the group. Because it's the human element, it's the weeds that I label it. So in the truest sense, you may find that, or I may find, that I'm a lot safer than I actually feel. It's just because of enduring psychological war, imagining or perceiving or experiencing a psychological war zone. It isn't divine sentencing. That's human condemnation. It's not God's voice. So it's an organization that is very punishing. It punishes a free thinking person. It even punishes a person who's adhering to the rules set out by the religion itself. And that I've got documented. I've got that documented over and over and over again until the person just breaks. That is the cruel father who exasperates their child. And that is sadly why suicides happen. I've been on suicide watch. I've had to watch persons. That's what it's called in the JW community. At Bethel, somebody is threatened to kill themselves, and now they call elders or night watch or nurses or whoever to monitor the situation. And what has happened in the past is if a person has been pushed to kill themselves, as soon as they do that, they might have been labeled as disassociated through their action or declared as not a JW. So the system disavows the person, especially if they go postal. So in a pressure cooker's condition, there's this constant fear of displeasing God. It's an ever-present risk of shunning, isolation, humiliation, shaming, whatever. There's this constant surveillance of conscience, thought, and even health decisions. Oh, you can't choose your own doctor. You must use a branch-approved doctor. So your health decisions are monitored, your health choices monitored. So there isn't a safe outlet to express doubt or distress. So that is an environment where despair can build silently until it just overwhelms. And when suicide sadly happens, the death itself can be framed as proof of spiritual weakness or disassociation or disfellowshipping in the heart. The person was not aligned with God. So we're told that there's a more enlightened view about suicide. But trust me, It's not clinical. Families and congregations are instructed not to frame it as the outcome of cruelty or systemic harm, or that they were to blame. It's just placed on the individual as their failure. And so it creates a false narrative. Jehovah's Witnesses don't kill themselves. No. If they did, they are not really Jehovah's Witnesses. Not really Jehovah's people. Mentally diseased. Disapproved. So the disavowal mechanism, by redefining the person as the not one of us at the moment of death. What an awful situation. Because it avoids taking responsibility for the pressures that led to the despair. It maintains the illusion of, oh, we're a happy, thriving community. It silences questions and protects leadership from accountability. And so that is institutional gaslighting. It's devastating. Why? Because it erases a person's story, their struggle, their path, their humanity. Society can't learn. I'm not condoning criminal action. I'm talking of a situation where there has been denial, where a family is denied the chance to grieve openly, and where there has been deepening trauma for survivors who are forced to live under the same system and know exactly what it does to those who fall. And so, yes, this is a very heavy talk outline. But this cycle does contribute to suicides. The denial afterwards isn't God's truth. It's a bureaucratic maneuver to protect the group's image. It's not about the individual soul. It's about the organization's survival, its assets. So let's name the disavowal dynamic out loud. It's really written down clearly. Organizations with this weed dynamic erase responsibility at the exact moment when its destructive culture has taken a life. And it is vital that we honor the weight of what is being said here. Yeah, I don't claim to be the clearest person with their videos. But like I said, a start has to be made, even if it's just my start for my own clarity. I've mentioned AI, and in this particular case, wider research fields. And if it's all going to genuinely serve humanity, it's vital to name these mechanisms for what they are. High control religions create conditions of chronic psychosocial stress and trauma, surveillance of conscience, threat of shunning, enforced non-conformity, withdrawal of love, the love bombing, and then suddenly it disappears, or superficial demonstrative love that's not genuine. These pressures are linked to measurable health outcomes, including mental health crisis and in some cases autoimmune or stress-sensitive physical illness. When a person breaks under the weight, for example, by suicide, the institution withdraws by disavowing them. It shifts the blame away from systemic harm and protects the image of the group. Nobody gets the clear story as to what's happened. Again, I'm not condoning excuse me, the criminal behavior. But when you have erasure of what's led up to a tragedy, it's another trauma. It's a secondary trauma. The life and the story of the individual are denied. The survivors are gaslit and silenced. So from a scientific and humanitarian standpoint, it's not just a religious matter. It's a public health issue. So if AI can help to map, document, and clearly define, identify these cycles in neutral evidence-based language, then society can actually start to recognize patterns of coercion and the actual health costs that are involved. Just like we eventually did with cigarettes and tobacco, or asbestos, or childhood abuse. So is it a pioneering frontline? Maybe. But let's draw the thread between doctrine, psychology, biology, and outcomes. Let's highlight what is exactly happening, the kind of overlooked but deadly pattern that deserves systematic recognition. Now, friends, family, those who have logged on to this channel, again, I thank you for listening if you've come this far. My hope is just to make a video document. It isn't an easy thing to make, nor is it an easy thing to necessarily listen to. But let me express gratitude and thanks for your attention. And again, these are my own thoughts. They are up for essential critical examination, and it is always best to defer to the licensed practitioners when it comes to mental health or medical matters, or if there is crime involved, to go to the authorities or the police that can handle these things. So thank you again for your attention.